All right. Hey, everyone. I am Jessica. So the escrow manager here at Clear Title, as Jen stated, and I am really excited about today's topic because this information really positions you as the expert and honestly the hero to your clients. So today we are talking compliance and it gets a little technical, but when you understand it, you, the agent, will gain the edge. And today is about giving you the clarity to identify these reportable transactions early, ask the better questions, most importantly, prepare your clients with confidence and work with your title partner to navigate this smoothly. Um, because this isn't just about a new rule, it's really about strengthening your professionalism, protecting transactions, and elevating the experience for your buyers and sellers. So let's dive in. Okay, so we've all heard the chatter that real estate has a new federal reporting rule going into effect. So today we're going to cover why this rule even exists, who it applies to, and when, what happens if buyers or sellers do not comply, how this impacts your clients, what information is actually collected, how to avoid delays, and then most importantly, I'm going to give you Clear Title's process and how we're making this seamless for you. So let's talk about the why. So FinCen, that's the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. It's part of the U.S. Department of Treasury, and their role is to combat money laundering and financial crimes. And here's the reality. Real estate is one of the top industries used for large-scale money movement. So why now? Well, it hasn't actually just been now. Over the last decade, there has been a significant increase in properties being purchased in LLCs and other entities. And under prior geographic targeting orders, or GTOs, certain counties were required to report residential all cash purchases over $300,000 made by legal entities. And those findings were really eye-opening. 7% of those transactions involved somebody who was already under FBI investigation. 40% of those individuals had been previously flagged for suspicious banking activity. So, because of those findings, the government is expanding those GTOs into a nationwide real estate reporting requirement. This now removes those geographic limitations and the dollar thresholds, and the focus is transparency. FinCen is implementing the rule so that they can prevent money laundering, reduce terrorist financing, reduce fraud, and identify hidden ownerships through shell companies. So if an LLC is purchasing property without any type of financing, most commonly for you will be those cash transactions, FinCen wants to know who actually is behind that LLC. This isn't about making transactions harder, and that's how it sounds, but it really is about transparency. If somebody owns the property, the plain and simple thing is the government wants to know who that someone truly is. So the new rule applies to transactions that we're going to identify here in this conversation, and it goes into effect March 1st. And this is for anything closing or transferring after March 1st. So if you have a deal that's already under contract and closes after March 1st and it falls under this classification, the rule will apply. Title companies and settlement agents are responsible for reporting non-finance transfers of residential real estate when the transferee is an entity or a trust subject to specific exemptions. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit too. So traditional financing already does this process, and those are handled by lenders. So we don't see a lot of that. And this is not going to be every transaction, but it will apply to your residential property. Those that are not financed, again, most commonly will be cash deals. When your buyer is an LLC, corporation, partnership, or trust, and then those exemptions or exceptions are going to be referred to as exemptions. And the most common that you're going to be familiar with or recognize is going to be a 1031 exchange. However, exemptions are going to be transaction specific, which is why I use an exemption checker internally through my system and will also be through our reporting partner. So if we ever hit that situation, I'll walk through that with you step by step and you won't have to figure that out alone. An important note is that on private and hard money loans, private loans or hard money loans are often still going to be considered reportable. So we don't want to assume that just because it's a private loan that it makes the transaction financed under this rule, because in many cases it's not going to be. This is why we have those checkers in place. There is also a reporting deadline, and though they are strict deadlines tied to this. Reporting must be completed by the last day of the month following a closing or within the 30 days of that closing date. So the good news is that Clear Title and I will handle the reporting process. However, it is important to know that we cannot close until we receive a clear to close confirmation from FinCen. This is how important it is and how much they're really overseeing this. So compliance is not optional on this. It is something that can't be handled after closing, has to be done prior to closing. So let's talk about those consequences. Penalties for non-compliance are pretty significant. Civil penalties start at $1,394 per violation and can go up to $108,000 per violation. There's also really scary language about potential criminal exposure and including 5 years of prison for willful violators. This is why it's taken very seriously because this isn't a suggestion, it's federal reporting requirement. So let's talk about a little bit about how this affects you, the buyers, and we'll break it down into pieces for you. So this change is directly impacting how we manage expectations really at the beginning of a transaction. As an agent, it's critical that we set early expectations because traditionally cash deals are quick and easy transactions, right? But moving forward, those non-finance transactions may include additional compliance steps. So that means that there needs to be more upfront communication, more preparation, and more document collection. We, and we could stay ahead of this by asking the right questions early, identifying entity ownership right away, collecting those required documentations up front, and helping clients understand the basic ownership structure so questions are answered correctly. Really important will also be keeping a pulse on any changes in your cash transaction entity that has entities in it. Um, Preparation is really going to be everything. So how this is going to affect the buyers. Buyers, especially those purchasing in an LLC or entity, will be asked to provide confidential information that they are not used to sharing. This is where you are going to become the hero. It is imperative that you prepare them in advance. Let them know what's going to be required. Explain that this is federal reporting and clarify that this is not negotiable. Encourage them to gather their documentation early so that they can answer those questions correctly. When your clients understand the why, they are much more comfortable with the process. So let's walk through what is going to be required from those buyers. So if the transferee, the person buying, is an entity, and so that's going to be an LLC, corporation, or partnership, um, when the buyer is when the FinCen will require from the buyer that the beneficial owners of the entity are outlined. That includes anyone with significant decision-making authority or anyone who owns or controls 25% or more of the ownership interest. For each of those identified parties, those individuals will have to provide their full legal name, their date of birth, their complete residential address, including any foreign addresses that may be associated with, and their principal place of business in the US if it applies, their country of citizenship, their tax identification number, that's going to be Social Security numbers, TINs, or any IRS issued number, and then they have to upload a copy of their valid government issued photo ID. This is going to be individual level reporting, not just the entity level. And we'll talk about the documents that identify this information here in just a little bit. Now, if the transferee is a trust, the trusts are handled a little differently. The transferee trust owners are determined by the role, not percentages, like they are in entities. So at the time of the transfer, we must identify the trustees, an individual with the authority to dispose of trust assets, a beneficiary who can demand or withdraw trust assets or is the sole recipient of income for that trust, a grantor or settler who can revoke the trust or withdraw any assets. Any of the individuals who are beneficial owners of an entity that holds one of those roles, because those are sometimes outlined in a trust as well. So for those are going to be identifying the individuals. Now we're going to collect information from the trust. We have to know the full legal name of the trust itself, the date the trust was executed, and if the trust has an identification number, we need to know that. Then for all those individuals, those trustees, the beneficiaries that we identified in the trust, they now have to provide their full legal name, date of birth, address, their identification number, and then upload a government issued photo ID. So those are breaking down entity and trust. Now for both of those, because we're discussing FinCen, right? And their focus is transparency. And this kicked off, right? We kicked off talking about all the chilling facts about fraud. So yeah, FinCen also wants a transparency on the movement of money. So for both entity and trust, they want to know not just the purchase price, but the total consideration. So though all of those individuals who that had to report all of their information, we also have to report the payments made on behalf of those transferees. This includes EMD funds, gift funds, and of course those final closing costs or the cash to close. So for every payment that's submitted for a transaction, we have to document the payment method, the account number if that applies, the name of the financial institute that those funds are coming from, and whether the payment is from a financial institute or not. So, and it has to be identified for everybody, for all of those people that we are. So if there's multiple, there's going to be multiple of those informations in there. They're tracking the money trail on this. That's a lot of information. And at the end of this, we're going to send out a quick, easy checklist to help you understand what is going to be, how this is communicated to your buyers from Clear Title. And we're going to go into here in a little bit how these buyers are reporting all this information that we just went over. But I wanted to talk about where the delays will happen and how, most importantly, how we avoid them. The most common reasons I anticipate to see delays under this new rule is going to be getting all the information and collecting that upfront. Buyers and sellers not checking their emails or completing the verification process is going to cause a delay. And then really the clients not understanding their own ownership structure. This is why we're taking the time to educate you now on this. Because, locating those incomplete company documents, invalid IDs also could be a problem. And then the really big one is going to be last minute contract changes or vesting changes. Because remember, we can't close until we receive a clear to close from FinCen. So again, preparation and communication is key on this. If we hear things like, my attorney wants this in a trust, or I'm going to put this in my LLC, or let's change the vesting, that can immediately make a transaction reportable where it may not have been before. And I do see that in normal transactions all the time. Last minute, I'll hear, the purchase agreement the whole time is in a person's name. And then as we get the clear to close and they now have their final numbers, I'm being told, hey, we want to put this in the LLC. We have to make sure we're talking about it way up front because this is where we're going to run into those delays now. The two most common documents that cause delays, even before this new rule came into effect and slows transaction down, are going to be operating agreements and certificate of trust. These two documents, they decide who is the ownership percentages, who the controlling person is, and that defines that out clearly in those documents. Those are there to protect you, your client, and the title company, and often don't exist, can't be located, or having to be created last minute. This is why we have to have the conversations very early in the transaction. So our process, here's the good news. We have partnered with one of the best firms, and true to form, we use technology to make sure that we're going to make this quick, secure, and seamless for you. So we partnered with FinCen Real Estate Reports. It's a proven, secure industry leader in FinCen filings. So they've been doing this for years, even for lenders, and now heading up this new things for many underwriters and title companies. Their system integrates directly with my internal software. And so it gives me deadline tracking, expected closing dates to monitor, real-time status update, and live support access for your buyers and sellers when they get into the system to put in their reporting. We're not guessing. We have visibility over the entire timeline. So what happens is step one, we identify that the transaction is reportable. Once we determine the transaction is reportable, you, the agent, will give me or your title company the email address and phone number for each of the party involved. This allows me to immediately initiate communication and begin reporting process early so that we're not waiting to that last minute. I will send out an email to your client, giving them the heads up that you're going to be, that I'm going to be initiating that report, which is going to be like that step two. What happens is I'll enter in the purchase agreement and general transaction details that's required by FinCen to start the report into the system. And from there, a secured email is sent directly to the buyer and seller. This is where they will complete their required information, upload their government issued ID, and validate all of their funding sources. Again, there's going to be a live support chat there built into the system in case they have questions or need assistance navigating through that system. They will also receive, especially for the buyer, and a very important reminder that comes up 2 days prior to closing to just reconfirm and update their payment information in case that's changed right before closing. And that's very important because that final clear to close won't come until the buyer actually validates that. Then they do the whole validation and provide that clear to close, which hits our file once that comes, and then I can tell you we are now clear to close because FinCen has given us that. They validated everything, and the compliance review has been completed, and all of the preparation for that required document has been done, and we get that clear to close. Our goal is to just make this as easy, secure, and compliant as possible. That's what we strive for. And with this system, as complicated as I made that sound, and in gathering all of the information, the system really makes it that easy for your buyer. So as long as, we, the agents, me as the title company, we're communicating with the parties on this. So we really just want you to be the agent in the know. The agent who will win in this market are the ones who ask the best questions, prepare your client early, understand basic ownership structures, anticipate compliance before it becomes a problem. Again, this rule really, it's not a hurdle. It's an opportunity to stand out as a professional who knows what's coming. Because when you educate your client ahead of time, you build that trust and you prepare early, you avoid delays. And when you partner with us, you stay compliant without the stress. Easy, transparent, and protected. And that's how we close. We want to see you at the closing table. At the end of this, I'll email out some resources for you so that you can save and keep in the future for this. And then, of course, I've got here, how to contact us, how to start your order with us online. We've got information on joining the Cedar branch. And then Jen is going to also jump into information on Bluebird U. But before I hand that back over to Jen, I wanted to see if there's any questions right now on this one.
And then put in the
Chat.
chat box, how does this work if your buyer, if you buy under your name and then after closing, the home is transferred into an LLC.
Yes, so I use the word cash because that's what you're going to be most used to hearing, right? But this is a non-finance transfer ownership. So that means if somebody says I'm gonna avoid this, so I'm gonna put it in my name and then I'm just gonna quit claim deed it into my LLC. Well, that quit claim deed is still transfer of ownership. So now whoever is preparing that deed is responsible for reporting to FinCen. And if you don't report, then you're subject to those penalties that we spoke about. There is no getting around this rule at all. I mean, they have broken it down into levels of who is going to be responsible for reporting this. So anytime there is a transfer of ownership and it is not financed, and this is residential, it is required to be reported. Any other question?
One other question.
I'm sorry.
Jen, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So you were saying that on that clear to close slide, is there like a time frame that they need for everything to be completed? Is that why you were saying like start it earlier versus a week before?
Yeah, you want to start it early because everything has to be verified, right? They're sourcing funds here. And we have all worked with lenders, right? There's 30 day lenders have 30 days to close. We're lucky to get done sooner than that. And a lot of that timing is because they're validating a lot of the information that buyers are sending into lenders. Well, now the same is essentially happening with those non-finance transactions, a cash transaction. They want to verify where they're sourcing the funds for the buyer. They're
Oh,
sourcing who owns those. Is it a legal entity? Is this person been reported by the FBI? Are there already suspicious bank reports filed on this person? There's a validation process when they go to verify who that person is that's behind the LLC or trust. So it needs to be started at the very beginning of the transaction because we can't close until FinCEN says, okay, we're done validating everything. You're good to close this transaction.
so really what it comes down to is the title company is not necessarily the one giving the clear to close.
Correct.
Correct.
Not on this
We
anymore.
never.
Clear to close has never come
Or
from the
yeah,
company.
never mind.
Lenders run that.
Lender.
And
Yes.
now in cash transactions or non-finance transaction, FinCEN runs that.
Right. Okay.
One thing to note about FinCen.
Can everybody hear her? Because you're muted, Jen.
Oh, I am.
Yeah.
That's dumb.
I can hear her through yours.
I think I should be okay.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, so one thing to understand about FinCen, this is a very organized, highly developed government entity that has existed for years and has been collecting data for years. We just haven't seen it so much on the real estate agent or even the title side because it mainly happens on the finance or banking side of the transaction. But what they're trying to do, or what the stated purpose of what they're doing is to try and stop fraud, funding of terrorist organizations and criminal activities and money laundering. So they've got some pretty long legs already. We will see how all of this plays out once they're now adding this cash real estate transaction purchase into the mix, along with all of the other things that they have. But for some of your buyers or investors or clients, they may already have a FinCEN file unrelated to real estate that this transaction might trigger some movement on that end. So that's why those things are happening.
Any other questions?
I just want to add in that we're having entities report beneficial ownership like directly to FinCen, and I don't know if they stopped doing it. The last time I had to do it, they said they weren't doing it anymore. So maybe this is their way of making that up. I don't know.
Could be. It could be. It's a little bit, honestly, it's a little bit jarring. The the depth of the responsibility that we're seeing on the transaction side of it. Like Jessica and I were just going over the responsibility for reporting because I mean, people are going to do whatever they're going to do. But like you can be held responsible if you filled out the deed, if you prepared the shares for transfer, if you wrote the purchase contract, if you like
Not using a title company
isn't going to
isn't
save you,
correct.
you know? So it's important. And we don't have, it's not like we have lots and lots and lots and lots of these transactions, but the more we deal with investors, the more we deal with um,
Trust.
trusts, the more you are going to run into these sorts of transactions. And you just need to be aware because real estate is super fun and exciting. And also, we often lose sight that we are orchestrating the largest cash transactions on a consumer level that happen in the whole country, you know, and in most people's lives. Maybe not for the investor that these are going to be in, that these regulations apply to, but we are still orchestrating these extremely large financial transactions. And sometimes that needs to be sobering for us. It can't all be fun, goofy videos and laughter at the closing table. We can always laugh at the closing table, but we also need to understand what it is, the industry that we're in. We're talking about trillions upon trillions of dollars in real estate. And that is a big deal. We got to know how to run it.
One other question. So let's say I was to go buy a house and it was, say, 500,000 and I had wanted to put, say, 200,000 down or a large amount. How do they approach that?
That's all done through the mortgage. If
That
you
is
have any kind of
financing.
financing, and you guys don't necessarily realize this because it's just part of the mortgage process. FinCen is just part of the mortgage process. When I was going through all my education courses to get my mortgage loan officer's license, there's so much, there's so many regulations, what has to be reported to FinCen, how those things work on the finance side. We haven't had to deal with it on the agent or the title side because that has all been the lender to this point. It is just now that the government is saying, wait, we have this side handled. We need to get nosy about this side and make sure that everything is okay over here on these, because it's been a, I mean, obviously it's been a way for people with ill intent to try and take advantage of the system.
Well, and just to kind of back that up, Evan, I don't know, I don't think it was you, but I remember it being a cash transaction that I was working with. And the buyer wanted to send money via wire. And they said, is that okay? And because at one point they had done this in a previous transaction, and I said, you need to speak to your lender, right? You have to speak to your lender and ask them because they're the ones who have to verify funds. Some lenders do not like EMDs to be sent via wire. They want to see it in an ACH. That's why we do ACH, where they want you to do a check because they're sourcing those funds. So now in a and in that, I told the agent it was a cash transaction. It doesn't matter to me how they send their EMD. However they want to do it, it's a cash transaction. Doesn't matter. Well, now that EMD is going to be sourced. So they're going to have to put how they're going to send that EMD in. So it is a mindset change. I think the most important thing that I wanted just to really relay to agents on this is it is important for you to understand how to identify um, LLCs and those entities and trusts up front because that's the role you're going to play. And right now for agents, they don't necessarily, I see it a lot in title. They don't necessarily care because they know title is going to take that over, have that conversation or tell you at the agent, this is what I need. And now it's going to be an important part on your part so that you're making your client happy and they're not upset with you. Up front. I think that's the biggest mindset that I want to portray here. Yes, you need to know all the compliance stuff. I'm handling that for you, but most importantly for you, you just have to know to be able to communicate that to your client and prepare them so that they know what's coming. Because those investors, who have done this a lot, this is going to be a big change for them.
100%.
100%. It is going to be a big change for people that have been using LLCs, and then it will be normalized, or regulations will change. But it is one of those things that we have to do. We don't really have a choice. Knowing how this works and how to position it with your buyers is going to make you look like a rock star.
So let me ask you this. When we're signing agency, if should we be asking them about an LLC?
100%.
And then when they
Always.
sign it, are they still signing under their legal name or the LLC?
Well, if they're purchasing property inside of an LLC that they own, they will sign their personal name on behalf of the LLC, and title will be asking for the operating agreement, making sure that that operating agreement gives authority to the person who signed the purchase contract that they have the right to sign it and the right to transfer their property. If not, they'll ask for documentation for signatures, for sure. So it's it's always a conversation we should have been having with our buyers, just like we do with our sellers. We just don't often. Like, even me, I'm like halfway through the transaction, I might know, oh, we're going to put this in our LLC, or oh, we're going to put this in our trust. More often, I think trust, if you're dealing with individuals, more LLC if you're dealing with investors. Although I think some investors do leverage trusts as well.
Those are two of the documents that agents are typically, in my experience at title, are not familiar with and often do not even ask for.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you hear LLC or you hear trust, as an agent, that very next question is, I need a copy of your operating agreement or I need a copy of that trust. And, for trust, the certificate of trust should be dated or needs to be updated every year annually. For clear title, if they don't have a dated certificate of trust dated within the past year, we're going to ask for another one.
Mm-hmm.
So those are quick things as an agent that if you're comfortable, you become comfortable, understand what those documents are, and you're asking for them, you're getting way ahead of that, of the curve and any frustrations that often cause those delays in transactions.
Anything else, guys? Okay. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for joining us, for actually being in Michigan right now, bringing us warm weather. We are cautiously optimistic about all of these new things coming our way as we go through this year. But if you guys have any questions about title, whether they're FinCen related or not, please feel free to reach out to me or Jessica. I can tell you right now, 98% of the time, one of the two of us will have the answer for you, and that 2% that we don't, we will find it. We're well connected and work with lots of people that have lots of experience in title. So anything that you need or any questions that you have, it is probably, in my experience over the last almost 3 decades, the least known quantity in the transaction for real estate agents. We just send it to title and they're responsible for it. They don't do anything but close when we tell them to. And there's so much more to it that will enhance your career and your business if you will take the time to learn a little bit about what's happening on this side of the transaction. It will also make your clients happier. They need to know the kinds of things that title is going to ask. You can prepare them for that before title so that, again, you're building trust in those transactions, trust in those relationships, so that people don't get spooked. These are the largest financial transactions individuals engage in. Trust is a huge issue. And when you lose it, it's so hard to build it back. Ask me how I know. Okay, awesome. Tomorrow is Thursday. We will be having morning meditation at 8:30, which has been so fun lately. And guys, I'm not gonna lie. And Evan can tell you because he's here for every single one of them. The amount of productivity that has happened at this branch in the last 2 months is blowing my mind. The opportunities falling in agents' laps here at the branch are blowing my mind. So if you can get in on some of this good juju, come on, sit at my office or join us online. I am having a Zoom room that'll be opening at 8:30 in the morning. So if you want to join us virtually because you're not able to come in that early, please do. And then at 9 o'clock, we hit whatever prospecting quote unquote phone that we have, and we prospect for a couple of hours, and just the energy is phenomenal and people are seeing such amazing results. So hop on board and get involved with that. If you need some direction on building momentum in your business, join Narmeen Friday from 1 to 2 for her momentum method class. And then we start all over again next week. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday is prospecting and mindset in the morning. And then next Wednesday, we go back to the flow shift. So I'll be back next week teaching again on that. We are going to be talking about identity and the flow method. So with that being said, thank you guys. Have amazing days. Enjoy the melting snow.
Okay.